What's up, everybody? Welcome into the show. It is the rapid rundown for week 15. Hopefully, you're playing in the playoffs like me in a bunch of my leagues, but maybe you're not, like I am in some of my leagues. And don't worry, if you're not, you can always get in on the DFS action or at underdog.com, one of our good friends. Make sure you check them out. You're listening to the Fantasy Facts right now, presented by Fantasy Data. I got my spreadsheet up ready to go. All the data coming from fantasydata.com. If you sign up for a subscription there, please do because it is phenomenal. Use the promo code FACTS. That's FAQS. Hey, use that same promo code for Underdog if you're trying to get in a few extra, little daily games. That's promo code FACTS, FAQS. In the meantime, let's jump right into the show. Got a lot to hit today. It is the first week back with everybody playing. Everybody's out there, minus injuries, of course. But every team is out there playing this week. There are no buys. The one thing you do want to keep in mind, though, is that there are Saturday games starting. Make sure you get your lineup set for tonight, Thursday night game. We have a fun one kicking off, San Fran and Seattle. We'll get into that in just a moment. But you also have 3 games on Saturday. So please, please, please make sure you're paying attention to those Saturday games as well. All right, jumping straight into it, San Fran at Seattle. Like I said, I actually think this is going to be a fun game. It may not be the most fun in terms of scoring. It may not be the most fun in terms of fantasy points, but I do think you're going to get a fun football game tonight. San Fran, I expect to win this game, and they're expected to win by 3.5 points, over or under of 43 points, which is a relatively low, on the lower side of over unders. It's not terribly low. It's not in the 30s, that's like your red flag that it's going to be just kind of an abysmal game. But 43, it's not really anything to get you that excited about. You are definitely starting Christian McCaffrey in this matchup. Brock Purdy says that he is going to fight through and play in this game, and I think that's going to be true. You're probably not going to get him rolled out there in anything other than deep super flex leagues. Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle are definite goes. Deebo Samuel is out. He is definitely out. The injury looked kind of bad, but it looks like it may not be as bad as it first seemed. But he is definitely going to be out for probably the fantasy playoffs, I would say, if not all the way up until the championship, but something to definitely keep an eye on, which does give a huge boost to CMC, Kittle, and Ayuk. I really like all 3 of them in this matchup, even though Seattle has been a decent defense, not a great one, but a decent defense. On the flip side of the ball, you have Geno Smith, who has just been phenomenal. You're going to be playing him, even though San Fran has one of the best defenses out there, which really brings me to right off the bat, my biggest bust of the week, or biggest bust potential of the week, is going to be Kenneth Walker. He's coming off of an injury. And he's going up against San Francisco's defense, which has allowed a league low, I believe it was 55 rushing yards per game. That is just crazy. Yes, Kenneth Walker has been used in every different part of the game, which is helpful, especially if you're in a PPR league. But Kenneth Walker is my start with caution, could be the biggest bust of the week player. I don't want to have to start him, but chances are, if you're in the playoffs right now, it's because he's given you some decent weeks. After Rashad Penny got injured and he took on that full role. But this is a week where if I have other options, and granted they're probably not going to be as talented as Kenneth Walker, if I have other options, I'm probably going to roll Kenneth Walker to the bench and roll somebody else out into my starting lineup. DK and Lockett, both wide receivers, I think you can get them going in this game as well. Again, tempering expectations slightly, but if Seattle is going to have a chance of beating San Francisco, I think it is going to be because of big plays from one of those 3 guys, DK, Lockett, or Kenneth Walker. I just think Walker's on the least likely side of making that happen. And like I expect San Fran to win this game. I expect San Fran to actually cover the 3.5-point spread, which to me means that Seattle is going to have to toss the ball some in order to be able to keep rhythm with San Francisco, which again, I think helps DK and lock it out a little bit. And I think could potentially hurt Gino in some respects because he's played well because of the rushing game along with that passing game that they have. All right, moving on to our first Saturday game. We have Indianapolis Colts traveling to the Minnesota Vikings. This should be a Vikings win relatively easily. They're only giving 4 points. And this is as of last night, thanks to our good friends over at bettingdata.com. Make sure you check them out. Um, Oh, George, you jumped in just like seconds after what I was just talking about. I think you're going to play Kenneth Walker because I don't know if you have many options left out there, but he is probably my biggest bust potential of the week because San Francisco's defense is just that stingent. Stringent, that's the right word. But it's going to be real tough sledding. But chances are you probably don't have other better options than Kenneth Walker. And I think Kenneth Walker, just based on volume, I don't think they're going to really spread it around as much in that Seattle backfield with him back and healthy. I think you're going to get Kenneth Walker as more than likely a low end RB2, and low end in that sense means closer to like the 20 to 24 in a 12-man league. I think he's going to be closer to that than he is getting 15, 20, 25 points in a week, in this week, particularly with San Francisco. The only way I see kind of a change to that is if he's able to really break off a massive run. Colts kicker, a smash play. Man, I am not a kickers guy. I'm not one of those people that think that there's. I'm one of those people that are much more like, let's replace kickers with another flex position. But the Colts going against Minnesota, I could see that being an option. One, the Colts are not finding the end zone nearly as much. Minnesota's been a defense that has been giving up points, which is a great segue into this conversation. I think Jonathan Taylor is a great play for this week. Michael Pittman, Paris Campbell gets an option. I don't like him particularly just because I don't necessarily like Matt Ryan. I feel like Michael Pittman as the main guy gets himself a little bit more action, but not nearly as much as a Paris Campbell believer for me. Do you want to play Myers on Seattle? Both kickers, I would stray away from Seattle's kicker more so for the Colts kicker. And then Sly in Washington. Washington, we have going against the Giants again. That game, I would feel you're going to get more field goals out of Indy than you are in Seattle against a really tough defense in San Fran, and also Washington going up against a defense that wants to get back on display after what the Eagles just did to them last week. I think your best bet is the Colts kicker. Thanks for jumping in with the comments, though, George. Really appreciate that. To finish out Indy, I don't think you're going to get much out of the tight ends here. Yes, it's a pretty good matchup against the Minnesota defense that started off a little bit better than they kind of been. I think they're looking a lot more like frauds, especially after the loss to the Lions. I'm not going to get any of those tight ends into really any lineups unless I feel, feeling a little squirrely and want to sprinkle them in some cheap DFS options. But other than that, there's Jonathan Taylor, there's Michael Pittman, and then I don't want to do too much with the Colts, even though it is a pretty good matchup. And like I said, Paris Campbell can be a flex in there, but not somebody I'm overly excited about working into any lineups here. On the Minnesota side of the ball, Justin Jefferson is an auto start. You're getting him out there no matter what. Kirk Cousins becomes a decent flex option here, but I'm not like a super flex option. In a one quarterback league, I'm not that excited on getting him out into the field, but it could be a streamable option here. Again, because Indy has just they've been torched in so many different ways, levels, situations. You could see Kirk Cousins being able to come out of this with a pretty decent stat line. Plus, it's also a 1:00 game, which Kirk Cousins just seems to love himself some 1:00 games. Moving along, Dalvin Cook, next highest projected on that Minnesota side. I love Dalvin Cook in this matchup. Yes, Indy has had a better run defense than pass defense, but Dalvin Cook, I think, can definitely get a lot of work in this matchup. And I don't think we're going to see necessarily as much, as much of a split as I think people originally kind of thought we might see, especially at the beginning of the year with Alexander Madison. It's also a game where you could sprinkle in Adam Thielen. If you've listened to the show before, I'm not an Adam Thielen guy. I think he has definitely crested that hump where now he is a guy that in terms of real football is valuable to your football team. In terms of fantasy football, he's just not going to get you as many explosive plays as you need for your flex type of position. I would be more inclined to play like a Paris Campbell over an Adam Thielen just because I feel that there's a higher ceiling there. But for this game, I could see Thielen being able to eat also just because Indy's defense, again, can get torched in a lot of different ways. And same thing with Hawkinson. One, the tight end position is absolutely depleted. If you've been on Twitter at all, you've seen it with all of the Evan Ingram takes. But Hawkinson is a guy that you can roll out here in this matchup and feel pretty good. Hawkinson has had just a ton of snaps. I don't think he's been below 75% of snaps in any week since he's come to the Vikings. The only thing he hasn't done since coming to the Vikings is scored multiple touchdowns. He has one touchdown so far. So if he can get into the end zone, it's going to be a huge day for him. And against, again, an Indy defense that can be beat, I think you're going to see a pretty good game out of Hawkinson. Moving on to our next Saturday game, we have Baltimore and Cleveland, and this is a game where I think, regardless of your stance on Deshaun Watson, in terms of fantasy, I think this is going to be his best game of the season. The Baltimore defense is struggling right now. You have Tyler Huntley, who is going to be under center, who just does not bring the dynamic aspects to the field that Lamar Jackson does. Lamar Jackson, obviously being a unicorn in his rushing ability, but I think you're going to get the best game out of Deshaun Watson. Amari Cooper is nursing an injury, so that is something to keep an eye on. He says that he's going to play, but it sounds like he's not going to be 100%, which to me means Donovan Peoples-Jones, DPJ gets the start. I don't mind throwing him in, especially in a 3 wide receiver, multiple flex type of league. I don't mind even rolling him into that 3rd wide receiver option. But definitely as a flex play, I really like him here. Nick Chubb should be able to make up for his relative dud of less than 10 points last week. I'm hoping that he's able to find the end zone. Want to have him in a couple of leagues, so it'd be really great if he could get into the end zone this week and against a Baltimore defense that can be beat both on the ground and in the air. I expect Chubb to be able to do, I would say, slightly better than the 13 PPR points that he's projected for, according to fantasy data. And then David Njoku, again, weakened tight end field. I don't mind rolling out Njoku, especially, he could be the guy that Watson finds in the end zone this week. He showed off really great hands already in the season. I'm okay with throwing David Njoku in as a starting tight end. Don't mind that at all. Unless, of course, your other tight end is Kelsey. Then your choices are easy. Don't complain about any sits. You got it really easy if you got Kelsey. On the Baltimore side of the ball, I'm not starting Tyler Huntley, even though, again, the Baltimore's defense is bad. Cleveland's defense is bad. I don't necessarily like either of these defenses, but I don't see Tyler Huntley being a factor, which really hampers Mark Andrews. But again, depleted tight end field. Mark Andrews, if you have him, you're rolling him out there. And J.K. Dobbins, let me double check. I don't think he's on the injury report again, but it feels like he just loves being on the injury report. I do not see him actually on the injury report. So that could be great news for For Dobbins, yeah, he's not on the injury report, even though he looked on that one run, it looked like he came up really like limping, which usually looks like a hamstring injury when a player pulls up like that. But if he's active, I think he is a fine play. Even though he's projected for only 10 PPR points, I think he could be over that, especially considering that this is a game where I think both teams are going to be running the ball just because I don't see them. I don't see them putting a lot of faith in Tyler Huntley. And like I said, I think we could see a little bit more out of Deshaun Watson, but they really limited him in the first week, and then the second week they let him open up a little bit more, not a little bit more, a lot more, because he had 42 attempts. So I don't think we're going to see quite that much for Deshaun Watson because this is a game that they should be able to win. So it might be more like that Houston game versus that game against Cincinnati. And just to throw it out there as well, this is the lowest, nope, sorry, second lowest over under at 37 total points in Baltimore. Sorry, Baltimore is getting 3 points. Cleveland's giving 3 points. So expected to be a relatively close, low scoring game. But anyways, enough about that. Like, who's really that excited about the Baltimore Cleveland, except for anybody from Baltimore and Cleveland? All right, moving on to the next Saturday game. And unfortunately, my games are all out of order here. Normally, I line them up, but a little bit of a busy morning. We have what could be the best game of the week, in my opinion, and that's Miami and Buffalo squaring off on Saturday night. It's an 8:15 Saturday night game. Again, if you have these Saturday players, make sure they're worked into your starting lineup versus in your flex positions. Like I was saying, I'd be happy with DPJ as a flex, but he should be a starting wide receiver. Depending on obviously if you got a lot of other wide receivers going on Sunday, because then you get more flexibility. It's like the Thursday rule, but now including Saturday in there as well. But Buffalo, Miami, so many big names in this matchup. It is a feast for the eyes, even though, and I think this is a weather concern, and that's something that you want to keep in mind. The over under is only 43 and a half. It does look like there's going to be some snow in Buffalo, which having spent almost 10 years in Buffalo, snow in Buffalo is fun. Okay. Yes, it's crazy when there's like 7 feet of it, but snow in Buffalo is a lot of fun. Going to a snow game in Buffalo, depending on which seats you're in, if you're in the Jim Kelly section where they have the heated seats and the little overhang, beautiful. If you're in the bleachers on the shade side, you're kind of freezing your ass off. But that's okay. You still, get a good game in this one at least. It is at home in Buffalo. Miami could be facing a little bit of cold weather shock here. But I don't think that's going to stop you from playing guys like Hill, Waddle, Tua. The big question is going to be whether or not Jeff Wilson is back and healthy. If he is back and healthy, I don't really like either of these two running backs. If he's not healthy, then I don't mind rolling out Raheem Mostert just in terms of volume. I don't expect a phenomenal game out of him, but when weather gets messy, a defender slips and boom, now you have a hole that he can exploit, and he's great at exploiting opportunities that the defense gives him. It's been one of his best attributes is that takeoff speed. So could be an option there. It could also just be if it's a complete snowstorm, I think it kind of diminishes this whole fantasy value, which is super tough because there are, like I said, studs all over the place. I'm not touching Mike Gesicki. He's just disappointed way too many times, even in a depleted tight end field. I would rather take a shot on, honestly, I'd rather take a shot. I have the Indy score still up there. I'd rather take a shot on one of the Indy tight ends than Gesicki. And that's with not knowing if it's going to be a Jelani Woods game, a Mo Alley Cox game, or a Kylan Granson game, right? So Gesicki just completely off the radar there. On the Buffalo side of the ball, you're starting Josh Allen essentially no matter what, unless, again, it's a complete snowstorm. Same thing with Stephon Diggs. Gabe Davis has actually moved into that number 3 projected spot at 11. This is going to be really, if you have them, you're probably rolling them out there and hoping for the volatility. The issue is, though, is that volatility has been a lot more lower ended than it's been upper ended so far this season. So Gabe Davis, If I am the underdog in my first week, I'm rolling Gabe Davis out there because I need the points. I need a big game out of Davis. If I'm the overdog, thank you, Kevin Hart. If I'm the overdog, I'm probably looking somewhere else and looking for more kind of safe points, and hoping my opponent doesn't have a Gabe Davis type of guy on the other side that just shifts the complete setup of the week. I mentioned last week that both Singletary and James Cook are going to be bad starts against the Jets. This is a better matchup, but again, another one that I'm not really forcing either of them into any lineups. I like Singletary a little bit more than James Cook, but that is because I expect Buffalo to be leading in this game. If this is one of those games where Miami gets a couple quick scores and they go up quickly, it becomes a little bit more of a James Cook type of setup. But I don't want to. I don't want to gamble on really either of those options. And with both of them being projected at under 10 points, and not really seeing much reason why they would be over that 10-point projection in real life, it puts both of them kind of on the bench or in like desperation, slide them into a lineup. I don't want them in many of my lineups. All right, so that does it for the Saturday games. Moving on into the Sunday games, we're going to what could be a fun game. I'm not sure yet. This is a game that's either going to be a lot of fun or just abysmal, and that's the Detroit Lions and the New York Jets. These are two teams really breaking their mold in terms of just being bottom feeders for so long. And neither of them, that's not true. The Jets have had playoff aspirations a little bit, but that seems to be waning just a touch. Mike White looks like he's going to get the start for the Jets, which is good. Goff has been phenomenal for the Lions. But can you really trust either of these teams? Really comes down to the bare bones questions of it. Uh, and the Jets have a strong defense. So Detroit on the road coming to New York, is that going to be the Jets defense kind of taking over this game and this game being a lot more low scoring? I could see that being the case. I could also see this being the case where Goff and the Lions are rolling. And the Jets are kind of backpedaling defensively, which then leads to the Jets slinging the ball a little bit more, which they can do. And also handing the ball off to Bam Knight, who's been a real nice addition. And a running back I think you can throw in there. I'd be more excited about putting Bam Knight into a lineup than either of the Bills running backs. Um, uh, and I think any of the Miami running backs as well. I think Bam Knight is kind of notched himself into a role there, that I think he's going to be able to do just fine. Um, yeah, George, benching Jamal Williams. The only thing with Jamal Williams is he scores touchdowns. But that's such a fluky thing. He's been so good at it. But they did actually start giving the ball to Swift in the red zone more. I don't have the numbers locked into my head, but that was something that I saw through this week. Is that Swift has been getting more red zone carries, but also on that same list was still Jamal Williams. They have roughly the same, which is good for Swift because he's been mixed in more, but is a tough play for Jamal Williams because it's either touchdown or bust, as Swift is kind of again carved out his role in this matchup. Or sorry, not in this matchup, but in this backfield. And completely agreed. The Jets have a strong defensive front. They've really built from the interior seven, and then threw in Sauce Gardner as well as a great just shutdown corner. So I really respect what the Jets have done defensively. Now the hope is, can they start putting all the pieces together? I feel like an idiot if he walks in with, but that's the thing. That's the thing with Jamal Williams is he's either going to get you like a touchdown, multiple touchdowns. Oh goodness, he had a 3 touchdown week already this season. And that's the thing, is that you're going to either roll him out because you're going to say, you know what, I need the upside. He's very much like Gabe Davis to me right now, right? Where the Gabe Davis piece of like, if I need upside, I'm going to throw Jamal Williams in there and go, come on, Jamal, have this be that week that you get your double touchdown. Sorry, I banged the table a little bit there, made the camera rock a little, but have this be that week that you're going to get those multiple touchdowns. If I'm looking at a safe side type of play, again, I'm probably able to find it somewhere else, considering that there's not the bye weeks. It's not apocalypse like week 14, which crushed me in one league, and actually like two leagues. It hurt pretty bad, and really in one league in particular took me out of the playoffs, which just gut wrenching. On the Detroit side of the ball, though, Goff, again, I think he's a upside QB2. I'm probably not rolling him out in a starting position. Same thing with Mike White. Probably not rolling him out in a starting position, especially with him dealing with a rib injury. Amon Ra, though, I am playing him regardless, with the thought that this could be, if he's locked up against Sauce Gardner the whole time, this could be a rough matchup for him. But Detroit has been doing pretty good with moving him around the field, getting him in the slot, putting him out wide, putting him in motion. There's been a lot of different ways that they've gotten him involved. So I do not fear putting Amon Ra in there. Again, yes, there's that possibility he has that dud if Gardner just locks him up. And then Swift becomes the starting running back for me, and then Jamal becomes that swing play where if I'm swinging for the fences, come on, Jamal, let that be the day. One more from George here. Only other option is Mike Evans, which, man, Evans has just had such a down week, and we'll move to that game next. Uh, Trust Evans to do something against Eli Adams or playing Jamal. You know what, George? I'm going to hold off on that in a second, and we'll talk about that Tampa Bay game right after this one. Not quite in order, but whatever. We'll go out of order. That's cool. On the Jet side of the ball, I already mentioned Mike White. I've already mentioned Bam Knight. Garrett Wilson, I think he's a start there as well. Not nearly as much fear in the Detroit defense shutting down any of these Jets players. It's more so the Jets offense imploding on itself. And also whether or not which Mike White do we get to see? Do we get to see 3 touchdown, 300-yard Mike White, or, the other Mike White, which granted he was dealing with rib injury and will be dealing with a rib injury this week. He is saying that he looks like he's going to play, though. Elijah Moore, Michael Carter, Tyler Conklin, those are all guys I'd much rather leave on my bench, but are guys that you can start in a pinch. I would say Michael Carter, though. Michael Carter has the most opportunity to make me kind of eat my words here, but I think I'm most readily sitting Michael Carter and just hoping the Jets keep rolling with Bam Knight. All right. Moving on to the Cincy Tampa Bay game. Cincy's traveling down to Tampa Bay. Should be a nice change of weather for them. Hopefully Tampa Bay, nice, warm, and sunny. Mike Evans, I saw a stat there that Mike Evans his touchdown drought has been the longest this year that it's been since high school, which is just mind blowing, especially because that's such a big part of his game. To go to your question here, George, I'm gonna do this in 2 ways, right? I'm leaning Jamal Williams probably 6 times out of 10. If you're even with your opponent, I might lean Jamal Williams. Let me try and get that little extra bit, because even those projections, you never quite know what's going to happen there. But I could see Cincinnati being able to kind of shut down this Tampa Bay offense, and Tampa Bay's offense just has not looked phenomenal recently. So I'm gonna go in that direction. 6 times out of 10, I'm starting Jamal Williams. Mike Evans is Bent's just such a part of this offense, but if they're not getting into the end zone, this offense has just seemed that they have not lived up to expectations. And so I'm gonna go Jamal Williams more times than not over Mike Evans. Mike Evans has almost 13 points projected for him. I could see that being significantly lower unless he's able to find the end zone. If he ends the drought this weekend, then yes, he should pass over that 13-point projection. He's just under 12.87. Chris Godwin has become more of a an integral part of this offense. It seems like. So I like Chris Godwin a little bit more than Evans and Tom Brady. Um, this is amazing to say. I feel shocked even saying it myself. I think I'd rather him be on my bench right now. I think the Bengals are another defense, kind of like last year, where they've been overlooked defensively, but they're just a solid defense. They don't have the massive playmakers like they have on some other teams, but they just have a solid defense, and I think a solid defense could be enough to shut down this Tampa Bay offense, which again has just been dysfunctional. With that being said, Rashad White, Leonard Fournette, chances are you're going to have to roll somebody out there if you have them. You probably don't have much better options unless you have like Rashad White, because he's probably been a much later pickup for you in the season. So maybe you do have better options out there. But a guy like Leonard Fournette, if you've had him, you've had to take him earlier on in the draft, and you may not have better running back options. Which again, Cincinnati's defense isn't stacked, but it's good. And so the question is, can Leonard Fournette and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers really up front, can they get a push? And that's one of the things they've struggled with recently. Um, a tight end option, Cade Otton, don't love it, but could be an option out there if you're super desperate at the tight end position. He's a guy that I do like, but again, just a lot of dysfunction in the Tampa Bay offense that I don't want to put too many eggs in that basket. One more comment here. Don't start Higgins unless he gets a full practice. Yes, that burned so many people. I am so lucky that um, I do not have a ton of shares of Higgins. I'm not lucky in that sense, but I'm lucky in that he didn't burn me last week like he burned so many people out there starting T Higgins. And if I heard this correctly, it sounded like he snuck onto the field for the first couple plays, and the coaches were like, "What the hell is this guy doing out here?" And then like yanked him off the field. That could be a completely unverified report. I just like the sounds of it. It just sounds one. It makes me go, I really like T Higgins. Like he has that desire to play, but also like that's kind of dumb. And also like, how did the coaches not know ahead of time? Like, bro, get off the field. Like, no, get like you're not playing. But yeah, no, totally agree, George. Unless you get full verification on T Higgins playing, yes, like have him out of your lineup and then let him be the guy that you're like, oh crap, I got to make sure I get him in versus, oh crap, I left him in my lineup. But it does look like he is going to play this week. But again, keep that in mind that we don't have a full report for. We probably won't have a full report for T Higgins until literally game time. And yes, hamstrings are completely fluky and are the ones that are like you just don't know what you're going to get out of the hamstrings. And yeah, at any point, a little tweak, and that's actually why I had to double check Dobbins, is because it looked like he pulled his hamstring in that long run, which that, like you mentioned, George, that shuts down your day right there. On the Cincinnati side of the ball, though, Joe Burrow, fire him up. Jamar Chase, fire him up. Joe Mixon, I think you can fire up in this matchup as well, especially like over guys like White, Fournette, things like that. Like, yes, he's definitely going to get the start over that. And then T Higgins again, I'm gonna have him out of my lineups if he's on any of my squads, have him out of my lineup and then work him in. And then if he's not gonna go, Tyler Boyd gets a little bit of a boost, but again is one of those type of plays where I'm not excited about, but can mix him in here or there, depending on I want to make sure I get him out of my lineup if Higgins does play. I'm not particularly excited about him. Hayden Hurst is another one. He's been great so far this season for fantasy. Well, great for a tight end. He's been great so far this season at the tight end position, but has been dealing with injury. Keep an eye on that. If he can't go, obviously you don't want him in there. But if you have another tight end option, I'd have him on the bench and that other tight end option sitting in there. And then if he gets the go at game time, I can make that switch and get him into my lineup. All right, I'm going to try and flow through a few more of these games a lot quicker now. I believe we left off looking at Atlanta and New Orleans. This is a game that I think is, aside from like two or three players, this is a game that you can pretty much avoid in terms of fantasy altogether. It is a decent over under at 43. I think this game is an under though. New Orleans defense has been decent. Atlanta's defense has not been, but New Orleans offense hasn't been necessarily the best. And Atlanta's offense has been, well, Atlanta's offense. If you don't know what that means, you may not have been paying attention through the entire fantasy season of what a frustration this Atlanta offense has been. Desmond Ritter does get the start, which we don't know what that's going to be. Which to me makes Drake London an interesting play. Maybe there's a little bit of that rookie connection happening there, or maybe there's not, and maybe Desmond Ritter just suffers that first game, kind of rookie, just poor performance. I don't see Cordarrelle Patterson or Tyler Algier necessarily having big games here. Patterson, though, is a guy that if I have him, I'm probably throwing him out into lineups. Again, mostly because at this point in the season, it's Patterson or like Moster or Jeff Wilson or somebody else that's a bench fill-in type of guy, waiver wire pickup type of guy. And I'd be much happier with a guy like Cordarrelle Patterson in there than one of those guys, either in Miami, Buffalo, something like that. But I'd start guys like Bam Knight over Cordarrelle Patterson if that's the final piece in my roster. On the New Orleans side of the ball, the only two guys I'm really rolling out in this game with any confidence are Kamara and Chris Olave. Yes, there's going to be opportunities, I would say, for some other Saints to get some run here, just because Atlanta's defense is not that good. But again, I'm not gonna play any of them with any confidence, especially in Week 15. Most everybody's playoff weeks, I'm not doing that. You're hoping if you've had Kamara all season, you're holding him for this opportunity. He has a great playoff schedule kicking off with Atlanta. And you're hoping for one of those Kamara 5 touchdown games in that holiday season, that season of giving. All right. I think that's all for that game. I don't want to spend any more time on it. Up next is Pitt and Carolina. This is an interesting game because Pittsburgh may be without Kenny Pickett. He's in concussion protocol. Carolina just upset, who was it? Seattle, which just blew my mind. Granted, with Walker being out, that did change a little bit of the dynamics for Seattle. But again, just Carolina being able to squeeze out that victory was amazing to see for Carolina and really head scratching for Seattle. But this is a game that really could be a very low scoring game. I think it is the third lowest projected score on the week at 37.5. Carolina's getting 3 points in this, which is, again, I think it's indicative of the Kenny Pickett injury and the unlikelihood that Kenny Pickett is going to be able to play, because this opened at plus 100 for Carolina, which probably would have been great money if you were able to pick it up, because I think Carolina wins this game. I'm not starting Sam Darnold unless it's just sheer desperation in like a super flex league. But other than that, there's no reason to start Sam Darnold. DJ Moore is an absolute, like, oh God, I got to hold my nose and put him in my lineup. But there is some potential there. He did lock up a bunch of times with Darnold before 2 weeks ago. D'Onta Foreman becomes an okay play, but Pittsburgh's defense is decent as well, so I don't necessarily love that. And then outside of that, I'm not starting anybody else in that lineup. On the Pittsburgh side of the ball, Najee Harris is the highest projected scorer. That's mostly because I think Pickett's projection of 11 points is factoring in, like, he might not play, so maybe we need to spread some of the projection wealth to Pittsburgh. Absolutely agree, George. Panthers D is a sleeper pick, so yes. I don't like many of the offensive positions for the Panthers, but their defense is definitely one, especially if you can scoop them up now and Pickett doesn't play. If Pickett plays, it's a lot harder to tell which offense you're going to get with this Pittsburgh team because there's moments where you're like, hey, they look somewhat functional. Like, look at them go. And then other times you're like, Najee Harris is just running into a brick wall. Deontay Johnson just disappears into oblivion. Chase Claypool's already been traded off. That's another one that I want to talk about because he's been kind of a bust. And actually, we skipped the Phillies Chicago game. I'm going to have to go back to that one. George Pickens, though, has been kind of moving up, but then there's plays where, like, I think it was 2 weeks ago, wide open in the back of the end zone. He tries to one hand it versus putting two hands on it. Now we get a drop in the end zone. Yes, he's made some phenomenal one handed catches, but man, you catch the ball, get to 6 points. You don't need that one handed grab. Yes, it's going to look pretty, but put two hands on the ball, come down with the ball. It wasn't like some of the other plays where like the defender has his arm like tied behind his back. It's not that. It looked from my perspective, and granted it's from the TV perspective, looked like he could have made a better play on the ball. Pat Fryermuth, I think, is a fine play at the tight end position, especially again, depleted tight end position. Said it multiple times. I really like rolling out Pat Fryermuth in this matchup. Um, and then other than that, I don't think there's much there. Yes, if Kenny Pickett can't go, I don't like really much out here. Najee Harris is just a sheer volume play at this point. I don't think there's much in terms of efficiency or scoring efficiency that you can expect from Najee. All right, so next up, but kind of going backwards on my list, we have Philly and Chicago. This is going to be one of the really interesting games of the week. Chicago is coming off of the bye. They have Justin Fields back and healthy. Um, and they're going up against the number one team in the Philadelphia Eagles, who only have one loss. Chicago is just trying to fight and find an identity, I would say more so for next year, see what they have in terms of players on the field that they can keep building around. I do. Man, I like Philly as 9-point favorites in this. I think they can cover that. Excuse me, cover that spread. Philly's projected one of the highest projected fantasy points for the team at 102. But man, Chicago, if it's not Justin Fields, it's nobody. And sorry, David Montgomery's in there as well. But again, against this Philadelphia defense, I do not like David. I don't like rolling David Montgomery out. If Najee Harris is a volume based play, David Montgomery is going to be that also, and mostly because they're not giving the ball to Tristan Ebner now that Herbert's out and done for the year. In terms of wide receiver, Claypool has been relatively a bust. Equinemius St. Brown had a good game, but then's been pretty terrible. Deontay Pettis had a good game, but that's been pretty much terrible. Byron Pringle's just been pretty much terrible. And Gil Harry's just been pretty much terrible. Like, there's just no wide receivers out there. Like, I feel like, me rewind, 10 to 15 years, I feel like I could be like, hey guys, I can catch. I'm slow as shit, but I can catch the ball. Throw me in there, coach. And I could work with some of these guys. Yes, that's obviously an overconfident, over exaggeration, but it just is how bad this receiving core is, with the exception of Cole Kmet. If anybody's going to get the ball in this receiving offense, it seems like it's Cole Kmet at this point. And then other than that, like Justin Fields, if Fields is going to bust a week, it's this week. Philly's defense has just been shut down on everybody that they've played. They haven't played many mobile quarterbacks, but they played Kyler Murray back in week 5, I think it was. And they held him pretty well. Only 4 rushes for, I think, 40 or 50 yards. And in terms of passing, I think he had like 200, 250, and that's in a game where Arizona's trying to match firepower with Philly, and obviously just weren't able to do it. On the Philly side of the ball, Jalen Hurts all day, every day. Miles Sanders, he's only projected for 14 points. I think he smashes this. I don't think he gets the 30-point game that he had this past week, but I do think Miles Sanders, you can count him in for a 20-point week. This Chicago defense is just Swiss cheese against the run. So that's Hurts running the ball. That's Sanders running the ball. You're going to roll out A.J. Brown because, I mean, I can't think of a reason why you put him on your bench. Even though you don't have to pass to beat Chicago, Philly has shown that they can do that quite well. AJ Brown's going to get out there. Devonta Smith. And the big news is Dallas Goedert may be active for this game. Honestly, if I'm the Eagles, if I dress him, I'm probably not playing him much, and maybe like a very limited pitch count just to see like how he's able to come back and whatnot. They don't need him to beat the Chicago Bears team. So if they give him another week, I wouldn't be surprised at all. But that's really good news that he may be coming off of IR. If not this week, next week definitely seems within reason. Um, if you want to get real squirrely, throwing in like a Kenneth Gainwell type of option in like a DFS play or something like that, he's probably going to be super cheap. And this running, like the Philly may just be like swapping in guys just to beat up and run down the clock against the Bears. And that's after, like I said, I could see Sanders having 100 yards, 100 yards, 2 touchdowns. And then like Gainwell coming in like the third quarter and ending up with like, 50 yards and a score or something like that. Not going to say it's definitely going to happen, but saying like it's a possibility. So if you're sprinkling in a lot of DFS plays and stuff like that, and you need a cheap little flex play, that definitely could be an option in there. All right, let's see. We talked San Fran, we talked Indy, we talked Detroit, we talked Philly, we talked Miami, we talked Atlanta, we talked Pittsburgh, we talked Baltimore. On to my Dallas Cowboys. They are traveling to Jacksonville. Dallas barely escaped Houston, which is just like what? Like they were a 3-score favorite against Houston and just barely snuck it out. Which means to me, Dallas is either going to come in and roll this Jacksonville team as like, hey, no, we're a playoff team. We need to show it. Or we're going to see a very, very close game between Jacksonville and Dallas. And I think I'm leaning more towards the really close game. Yes, I think Dallas pulls it out. A 4-point favorite, though, I don't necessarily like that because I do see a situation where Dallas turns the ball over to this Jacksonville defense, and their defense plays well, but is not necessarily not necessarily against Jacksonville, which has some playmakers out there. And if Dallas does one thing, it's over commit to certain plays. And guys like ETN, guys like Christian Kirk, guys like Trevor Lawrence are going to be able to take advantage, possibly take advantage of that over committing by guys like Trayvon Diggs, who's well known for trying to jump routes and then being way out of position because it's a double move or something like that. So that being said, I don't mind rolling Trevor Lawrence out, especially after the week that he had this past week. I definitely think you can throw him out there. Evan Ingram is not going to score you 40 points again, but is again another solid option in this matchup. Travis Etienne and Kirk, I think, are fine. Zay Jones is the interesting play here. I think it really depends on which of those two games you get out of Jacksonville. If Jacksonville is getting rolled by the Cowboys, which again, I could see that happening, and not just because I'm a Cowboys fan, just because I think they have the firepower to do it. And especially if that defense can be opportunistic and some of those overcommit plays actually turn into turnovers and not big plays for the offense, I could see this being a heavily lopsided game. But Zay Jones, if Jacksonville needs to throw the ball, I could definitely see Zay Jones having a decent game because he's been able to mix in with some of those big games. And then, am I worried about ETN? I am worried about ETN, but not worried to the point that he's off of starting rosters. He's very much like Kenneth Walker to me in this situation, except Kenneth Walker is going up against a much better defense. ETN here, like I mentioned, he's one or two plays, especially against a Dallas defense. Like I said, they'll overcommit to something, and ETN could take advantage of it. So this is one of those plays where it's like, yes, I'm nervous about ETN, but I could totally see ETN having a better day than Kenneth Walker, a bunch of different ways. And that's not to say that's not to diminish what Walker's done. It's more so just to say like Walker's going up against a buzzsaw of a defense in the 49ers. Whereas Jacksonville's going up against a good defense in the Cowboys, but not one that's necessarily just going to shut people down. And yes, the Texans clearly threw the game. Yeah, I mean, well, we won't get into that, but the it was mind blowing how close that game was, and the fact that Houston, they could have upset the Cowboys. I was getting many messages in my inbox from dear loving friends laughing at how bad my Cowboys were playing. But again, I think this is a game. Cowboys, I think they can come back. Dak Prescott, I think is going to be fine here. Unfortunately, yes, he's warming up for his turnovers, getting ready for the wild card weekend of his turnovers. Knock on wood. Hopefully, he gets past that, but he's warming up for it. Yes, he's probably going to have a turnover or two in this game, unfortunately. But I could see Dak still having a decent game. I could see CeeDee Lamb having a decent game. Tony Pollard in the mix here. And then again, this becomes like one of those questions of which one do you believe more? Do you believe more of it being a close game, or do you believe more of it being the Cowboys rolling? I'm still going to put Zeke into the lineups in this matchup, just because I feel like he's going to be a very safe play, and I think Zeke can find the end zone in this matchup again. And just again, if you're that underdog in your playoff matchup, ETN's your way to go. If you're the overdog in that matchup, I think you can play Zeke confidently, saying Zeke's going to get you 10 points, whereas saying ETN's confidently going to get you 10 points is a little bit more stressful. But again, that upside for ETN, like Zeke's not going to get you a 20-point game. ETN has the possibility of getting you a 20-point game. And Joe, Cowboys D's have been soft the last couple of weeks. Yeah, I mean, if you watch the Houston game, yeah, there's some Charmin going on. But hopefully we get back to the Cowboys defense looking like it did in the middle part of the year. This is the time of the year that they have to get that defense solidified. But yeah, completely agreed. There was definitely some holes in that defense. But that's why I think this could either be a close game between Jacksonville and Dallas, with Jacksonville with the possibility of pulling it out. That's why that 4-point spread is like, ugh, I don't know if I like that. Or it's Dallas just rolling, and I think they win by two scores. But Schultz is definitely a tight end start, and then Gallup is a decent little play in there as well. Noah Brown, yes, had a good game against the Texans, but I think that was more so just the offense just seemed weird. It's almost like they overlooked the Texans, which, I mean, can you blame them? And just had to kind of come back and force their way back into the game. All right, moving along. Got to speed it up a little bit so we can finish this hopefully in under an hour. We have Arizona at Denver. Denver's defense just shuts down everybody. This is the lowest over under of the week at 36.5. And honestly, yeah, I could see it happening. No Kyler Murray. You're going to get Colt McCoy. Denver has a whole week to prepare for Colt McCoy. DeAndre Hopkins, I still want to roll him out there because he should get peppered with 10 targets a game. Joe, real quick, throwing it back. Thoughts on getting T.Y. Hilton? That's cool. That's it. That's cool. I don't think it's going to do much for the Cowboys right now. T.Y. Hilton is a 30-plus-year-old speedster that's been just plagued by injuries. Could it help the wide receiver room? Sure. Could it help, just help build up a relatively young group of wide receivers? Yeah. Do I think he's going to do much for fantasy? No, not at all. And your thoughts too. Glad we're on the same page, Joe. As for back to Arizona, Hopkins, I think you're rolling him out there. Probably going to get like 10 targets, especially in a PPR league. He should get you about 10 points, even if it's just 5 catches for 50 yards. That's a complete possibility. Could also be like 7 catches for 30 yards. Also a complete possibility. I like James Conner. At least in terms of volume, I don't see him necessarily breaking off a hundred yard game with multiple touchdowns, especially against this Broncos defense. But in terms of volume, he should get enough play. Outside of that, I really don't like anybody else on this Arizona deep offense. Yes, Marquise Brown has been rolling and has had some nice plays. I'd probably mix him into some flex plays as well. But with Colt McCoy, I don't know if I trust this offense enough to be able to feed multiple players, which also doesn't really give me much in terms of like tight ends or Dortch or Robbie Anderson or anything like that. And again, Robbie Anderson had a decent week this past week, had a couple big plays for Arizona. On the Denver side of the ball, Jerry Judy, welcome to the pros, but also come on, man, you don't touch the refs. Like I that's like every level of every sport ever is don't touch the refs. So yeah, little bit of a boneheaded play. Really surprised that wasn't an injection there. Really surprised there isn't more harsh kind of fines coming down on him on this one. But he should have a relatively good game. Russell Wilson, let me just double check because Russell Wilson did leave the game at the end of last week. Let's see. He hasn't participated yet this week. Right now, fantasy data is projecting him as the starter with 11 points. He has anger issues. Yeah, Joe. Judy has some anger issues, but let that go on the field, which he did. Let that keep going. Let that fuel you. Let that keep you in the play, and not after the play. Which yes, he may have. He probably he was held on that last play, but that's one of the things like you have to I won't get too much into my soapbox, but like if you look at only one play, you miss the entire 60 minutes of the rest of the game, right? And that one play impacts all the rest of that time, and all the time before it impacts that one play. But has the whole team played better, it wouldn't have mattered if you were held on that one play because your whole team would have been in a better situation. But yeah, I like rolling Jerry Judy out there. Let that young man eat. And then other than that, like Sutton, maybe we'll see what happens. And then like Latavius Murray, like ugh, I don't love it. I really don't want him out there, even though he's projected for 13 points. I really, really don't like it much at all. Um, yeah, there's not much to like in this Denver offense, especially if Russell Wilson can't go. If you have Brett Rippon out there, he's not ripping the football all over the field. So you like that little play on words? And there goes all of our viewers. All right, moving on. We spent more than enough time on Arizona and Denver. On to what either is going to be a fun game because it's going to be like a Madden game, or just a game where you're like, please stop, just end it a quarter early. And that's Kansas City and Houston. Kansas City is a better team, I would say, right now than the Cowboys. I don't think that's a hot take at any point. And Kansas City, I don't think is going to let Houston do what the Cowboys let Houston do. And I say let because I don't think on a head-to-head matchup repeatedly that Houston does what they did last week to the Cowboys. I don't see them doing that to Kansas City. The over-under is interesting here at 49.5, which is a little bit low for a KC game, but mostly because it's Houston. And can you trust Houston to score any points? And it's like, not really, not too much. If you look at the implied total because of the 14-point spread, KC is expected to score 31.75 points. Houston expected to score 17.75. Not anything exciting out of Houston. You're going to roll out Pat Mahomes because he's, Pat Mahomes. You're going to roll out Travis Kelce because he's Travis Kelce. I like rolling out Juju, and I actually think you could roll out both Pacheco and McKinnon in this matchup. And then outside of that, I don't really feel confident about too many other players. Can you roll an MVS out there? Yeah, maybe. Can you, like, Tony may be healthy in this one, but again, not somebody that I necessarily want to roll out. Unless I'm in the mindset that KC is up 50 in the third quarter and they just start throwing some backups in there, which again could be a possibility. Not saying it's going to happen, but could be a possibility there. Houston, Davis Mills, Jeff Driscoll. I don't know what's going on with that time split there, but that really gave the Cowboys some issues. If you're in, I believe it's a Yahoo league, and Jeff Driscoll is listed as a tight end, fire him up. He's like Taysom Hill, but somehow on a worse offense. But go ahead and fire up Jeff Driscoll as a tight end because it seems like they're just going to give him the ball in a bunch of different ways. So if you are in tight end purgatory, Jeff Driscoll can be an option. I think it's only available in Yahoo, but check it out. I know on Sleeper it's definitely not, and I haven't checked on ESPN because I have decent tight ends in that. But other than that, I am not starting Rex Burkhead. I'm not starting Daria Ogunbowale. I practiced that one for just that moment. Brandon Cooks may be healthy. Nico Collins may be healthy. I'm not really excited about starting either of them. But this is one of those games where if they are healthy, I could put them into a flex position and be like, okay, Kansas City doesn't have a great defense. Houston's going to have to throw the ball a ton. That could lead to a PPR day for either of those two wide receivers. If it's not, then maybe Chris Moore sprinkled in. But again, this is a Houston team where you can pretty much avoid most of them because it's all just it's all just home run shots. You're either going to strike out really badly or you're going to hit a home run with it. And that's basically all of Houston. All right, moving on. We have Tennessee traveling to the Chargers. The Chargers being favored by 3 points at home, which I actually feel like is a little disrespectful considering how Tennessee has been not the best recently. And the Chargers are getting healthy. I could see this. I'm going to do a little bit more research over the weekend, but I could see this being one of the games I sprinkle some cash on with the Chargers covering that 3-point spread. I like Justin Herbert in the matchup. I like Austin Eckler. I like Keenan Allen now that he's showing that he's healthy. That's good. Mike Williams came back and looked good. Gerald Everett becomes a little bit more of a, can he still get the volume that he got when Keenan Allen and Mike Williams were out? He became one of the main pass catchers of the team. Josh Palmer, Joe, you have Palmer. They're spreading the ball around, so it's like, I mean, it would really depend on who else you have on your team, but throwing him in as a flex play against the Tennessee defense that has shown some holes in a Tennessee team that's really shown a lot of holes over the past couple weeks. He's a guy that you could sprinkle in there and hope that he's in one of those mesh plays at 3rd and 10, third and goal. And he's in one of those mesh plays, and he's the guy that leaks out open, and Herbert can hit him, and boom! Now all of a sudden your day's made. Not somebody that he's definitely taken a lot of hits, even though he's looked good in the middle part of the season. Just with guys coming back and healthy, definitely taking some hits there. Palmer or Campbell? I mentioned not being a huge fan of Campbell earlier on in the show. With that matchup against Minnesota, not so much because of the Minnesota defense, but more so just because I don't trust Matt Ryan at this point in his career. But I think just in terms of who's going to get the most opportunity, I think you have to lean Campbell in that situation. Plus, with it being a Saturday game, I kind of like getting some of those home run plays where it's like, all right, let me know now. Are you giving me 0 points? Or are you giving me 30? If you're giving me 30, I can make some other decisions on my Sunday games. If you're giving me 0, now I'm going, okay, now I'm stuck in this position where I gotta get more guys swinging for the fences, and I'm either gonna strike out and we're gonna lose the game, or I'm gonna hit a home run and it's gonna be a close game, or maybe I get on top. So I like Campbell over Palmer in this based on just opportunity. If something comes out late about Keenan Allen's hamstring bothering him again, goodness, who knows with Mike Williams? Like, he could go for a jump ball and jump 4 feet in the air and land on his hip, which seems to be the only way he lands going for a jump ball. if something like that comes out through the week, then yeah, I think Palmer jumps over Paris Campbell. But that's my initial thoughts at the moment. And no, thank you, Joe. Thanks for being a part of the show. All right, on the Tennessee side of the ball, if it's not Derrick Henry, it's nobody. Um, the Chargers have a defense that can be beat on the ground. Derrick Henry is a running back that can beat just about anybody on the ground. The question is, are they going to be able to stay committed to Derrick Henry in that rushing game with the Chargers passing attack and the Chargers just offensive attack that they have? Can Tennessee stay true to that rushing attack? And that's the biggest question mark. And that's like you have Derrick Henry, you're rolling him out there, but he's projected for 18 points, and I could see him being closer to 10 if he can't find the end zone. It all comes down to whether or not he finds the end zone. And the big question is, can Tannehill move the ball with Treylon Burks, Robert Woods, and tight end newcomer Okonkwo? Um, Man, it's tough to say yes, but it's also tough to say like, hey, the Chargers defense is really going to shut them down. I'm not starting Woods. I'm not starting Burks. And well, that's not true. I could roll Burks out there into like a wide receiver three. I could see him kind of to Joe's question before with like Palmer and Campbell. I could see him kind of mixed in there also as like a what about that guy? I think I still probably lean. I think I'd still probably lean a little bit. No, that's not true. I might lean Burks on that one. No, the offense is too bad. I'd have to do a little more looking, but I think I'd probably still lean Campbell, just because Minnesota's defense is just really weak. But Treylon Burks becomes a flexible play in there. And yeah, Joe, again, same thing. Like I want to see what happens with Burke Okonkwo on the field. And Tannehill is a good play action passer, which should open things up for the tight end and for a guy like Burks to be able to eat. It could also open up some things over the top for Akeem Westbrook. But again, that's somebody you're not going to start unless you're doing like a one game kind of DFS play. That's probably enough for Tennessee and the Chargers. Moving on to New England, traveling to Las Vegas. We're way over time, but we're all right. Definitely enjoying everybody's conversations happening right now. But New England and Las Vegas, Deontay Adams, Josh Jacobs. Looks like it was just a pinky dislocation. They said they popped it back in. He was able to do just fine. But yeah, if you have Jacobs, you're playing him. What a phenomenal hit he's been this year. Really, really love everything he's been doing, and especially the fact that I was like, y'all are disrespecting Josh Jacobs having him fall so far down drafts. So glad he's having a great year. Solidifies at least one of my takes, at least one as a good take. Derek Carr becomes a little bit more wishy-washy here. Bill Belichick has a way of making average quarterbacks look bad, and I think Derek Carr is a relatively average quarterback. But this is also a game where New England just they don't necessarily have all of their pieces right now. They're not nearly as competitive of a team as you're typically used to seeing the Patriots being. So Carr in a pinch, maybe, but definitely a guy that I think you can stay on either waiver wires or your bench or something like that. In unless you need them in a super flex league. Mac Hollins becomes an interesting play here. It depends on what the Patriots do defensively. There have been times where the Patriots would put their number one receiver on the offense's number two receiver and then bracket the number one receiver with like this number two corner and a safety. I don't think you're going to stop Devontae Adams doing that, which could mean that if they're putting their number one corner, Stephon Gilmore, on Adams, it could open things up with Mac Hollins. I don't mind Mac Hollins as a sneaky play here. I think he's a guy with a lot of upside, and I think he could smash his 8-point projection on fantasy data. On the New England side of the ball, Mac Jones is projected for 15 points against the Raiders. Could he put it up? Yeah. Are you going to play him with any confidence? Me, absolutely not. You, I don't know. Maybe you tell me. Are you going to play him with any confidence? The only guy with any confidence that I have is Ramondre Stevenson, and that's if he's gets full clearance before the game. because of his ankle injury this past week. Jacoby Myers looks like he's going to be good to go this week, which is a boost for Mac Jones, but again, doesn't boost that much for me. Devontae Parker looks like he may be back as well. But again, it's Mac Jones, it's Ramondre Stevenson, it's Jacoby Myers. Those are the only guys that you'd be rotating into any type of lineups here. And I like I said, Stevenson is number one, and then Myers after that. It is worth, if you haven't already, it's worth picking up guys like Kevin Harris and Pierre Strong. If Ramondre can't go, um, Kevin Harris should be the guy that steps into that main role, but also should be a little bit of a split with Pierre Strong mixed in there as well. And that's more than enough for New England and Las Vegas. Last two games, we have the New York Jets traveling to Washington. This is a relatively low scoring game. It's a game that you're going to get very iffy quarterback play. And the question is, which defense is going to force the other team to turn the ball over? Right now, it is a 4-point favorite for the Washington Commanders, which to me leans like I think I might put a little change on the Giants here at plus money. Um, but again, I'll do a little more research on that. But just initial kind of takes on it. I kind of like the Giants up against the Commanders, even though they're on the road, even though they just got beat by Philly pretty handedly. I could see the Giants wanting to come in. It's a divisional game. It's a game that they play a lot of. They know each other. They know the teams. It's a game where I could see the Giants turning over Tyler Heineke a number of times. Um, but it's also a game where I could see the Giants defense getting out of position and Heineke taking advantage because he's a gunslinger. He's going to be whipping the ball down the field. I'm not a huge Heineke fan, so Heineke fan. So I am very happy putting him on the bench and leaving him there. Terry McLaurin is a risky play, but he is one of your studs, so you're going to get him into your lineups. And then the question is Brian Robinson or Antonio Gibson. And honestly, it's both of them are flexible plays. Just fine with putting them in the flex, which they should be because it's a Sunday night game. Throw them in the flex and just let it ride out. It's going to be really tough to tell which one of these guys is going to get the work. Is this going to be a game where the Commanders are able to get up a little bit? They keep handing the ball off. They want to keep pounding it straight at the nose of the Giants defense, which the Giants have a pretty good defense, so I wouldn't think that would be their game plan. It makes it feel a little bit more like an Antonio Gibson game plan of getting him into space, letting him, getting a running back, even though a converted wide receiver to running back, out into space and getting him one-on-one against corners, nickels, things like that. I think should be the Washington game plan, but what they actually do is going to be interesting to see of which of these two running backs get the most work. But again, I think you could flex both of them, not on the same team. You pick one, but if you have one, I think you could throw them into the flex and kind of play the gamble. On the Giants side of the ball, Daniel Jones is projected the highest at 15 points, then Saquon Barkley at 14. I think Barkley is the one that should be over projection here. Daniel Jones, again, this could be a turnover game for him, or it could be a game where they get Daniel Jones running. That's when he's at his best, and you get a little bit more out of Daniel Jones. But again, the variance, I don't think there's much in the middle for either of these teams' quarterback play. It's either going to be good, and you're going to be like, wow, they had a really good game, or it's going to be bad, and you're going to be like, man, that quarterback's trash. Which is going to be tough to play for either team. But Darius Slayton, I think you can roll him out there as a wide receiver 3 type of option in this matchup, and with the potential that he could be more. Isaiah Hodgins has gotten a little bit of noise. Has been a waiver wire pickup, but not necessarily somebody that I think you need to force into any lineups. And then outside of that, yeah, that's basically it. I don't think there's much else on the Giants offense. It's either going to be kind of, the same thing I mentioned with a couple other teams. It's going to be Daniel Jones in a super flex league. It's going to be Saquon in just about every league. And it's going to be Darius Slayton, depending on who your wide receivers are. He's a nice little throw in as either a flex or a wide receiver 3, depending on your league settings. I wouldn't want him as like a wide receiver 2, though. I think that's a little bit too much, even though I could see him getting into that range this week. All right. And then the last game of the week, the Los Angeles Rams taking on the Green Bay Packers. Oh, what a duty fest for a Monday night game. Over under of 39 and a half. Green Bay is expected to win by 7. I don't trust Aaron Rodgers this year. I don't trust this offense. Yes, Christian Watson is an auto start, but know that the other shoe is going to drop at some point. But I'm going to keep rolling. I'm at the craps table, and I'm going to keep rolling until craps comes out. Because Christian Watson has just been that dude so far for the past, what has it been, 4 or 5 weeks, something like that, where he's had at least a touchdown. But man, it's tough to play Aaron Rodgers in this matchup. Aaron Jones he was dealing with an ankle. I think it was an ankle injury. Let's just see what his status is at the moment. Yeah, there's nothing updated yet on the Rams Packers game. But Jones, Dillon, they're going to be running into the teeth of this Rams defense, who, even without Aaron Donald have still been effective enough to shut down a lot of teams in terms of their rush. So it doesn't make it like AJ Dillon is not a guy that I want to play in this week. Aaron Jones, it really depends on like his level of health, whether or not I'd play him, and that would be hoping that he gets involved in the receiving game and not just running again straight into the teeth of this defense. Alan Lazard becomes a playable guy, but not a guy again that I have a ton of confidence in. This Green Bay team is just a team I don't have a ton of confidence in, and part of it starts with their offensive line. And their ability to protect Aaron Rodgers and their ability to open holes for the rushing game, which just has not been there. Joe, I wish I could share. I don't know if this is enthusiasm or sarcasm. If it's sarcasm, I share it. If it's enthusiasm, I wish I could share it. It is not. It's not time to bake the donuts. Baker Mayfield, yes, he's getting the start, but good God, the Rams are just difficult to watch. And Green Bay, I mean, like their defense isn't the their defense isn't bad. Their defense gets taken advantage of when they're on the field for 90 plays because their offense has just been so anemic they can't move the ball. Or their defense is on the field in difficult situations because their offensive, has turned the ball over, the 3 and outs. Sarcasm for sure. Okay, yes. Joe, we're on the same page once again. Definitely sarcasm. I mean, Baker had some moments where he looked okay. Yes, having more than 2 days is going to be good for him in terms of planning. But come on now. Like, okay, you know what? I will say it. I have a league where I've started Ben Skorenik for a while. It's a very interesting league. There's no quarterbacks. It's all flex positions. And it's like, is it 12 starters in a 12-team league? So you're legit starting just about everybody. And Ben Skorenik, I'm going to keep him in the lineup because he seems to be the best wide receiver on the Rams. Tutu Atwell has had a little bit of work as well. He's been a decent little over-under prop type of play. Just because his yardage has been so low, it's been like 25. If that's the case again, I don't see why you can't throw him in there. Van Jefferson, again, it's like if you have him, yeah, you're probably going to roll him out. But what type of confidence do you have with it? And it should be pretty much none. And then Tyler Higbee is nowhere near what he was earlier on in the season. Higbee becomes a guy where, yeah, I'm okay with him being on my bench. And not because of like, I want to start like Robert Tonyan on the other side of the ball. It's more so like, I think I'd rather take shots with other guys. I don't like the Baker to Higbee connection here. Yeah, And that does it. That does it, ladies and gentlemen. It'll be interesting to see what Baker does in this matchup, but not not something that I'm looking forward to. He's projected at 12 points, and let's be honest, like if he gets 10 to 15, you're gonna be like, oh, look at that, not bad, Baker. But that does it, ladies and gentlemen. That is our show. So much for Rapid. Good golly, Miss Molly. We went almost an hour and 20 minutes there. I definitely got to get to work. So I will catch you all on the flip side. In the meantime, check out fantasydata.com. Check out us on Twitter at FF the At Home Dad. Catch you on the flip side.